What is a four-letter word that you don't want people to use to describe you? What is a four-letter word that you don't want people to use to describe you? Mine is lazy. I do not want people to call me lazy. You can call me tired. You can call me busy. You can call me overwhelmed. And you can call me to dinner. But do not call me lazy. Jesus does call someone lazy. In our text today, he's going to refer to somebody lazy. And truthfully, it is an accurate description. It is not wrong, and I would hope that none of us want to be called lazy. Now, do we do things at times that are lazy? Absolutely. Absolutely. And we use the online services sometimes because we're lazy. I don't feel like walking through Walmart. I'm just going to place an order and I'll go pick it up or have them deliver, right? Sometimes I'm just lazy, just don't want to get out. Too cold, don't want to get out, I'll deliver. I mean, we can do that occasionally and we're fine. And nobody's going to fault us with that. But here's something that is a principle that I hope that you'll catch from our story today that Jesus tells us. Doing nothing is never neutral. Doing nothing is never neutral. In Matthew 25, Jesus is telling a story, and there's I think it's 14 through 30 is the actual verses. But I'm just going to retell it real quickly and then read you the end of it. So he tells a story about this guy who's going away on a journey, and he leaves 3 servants. One, he's left 5 bags of gold. One, he left 3 bags of gold. One, he left 1 bag of gold. And when he came back, the guy that had 5 had doubled it to 10. The guy who had 2 doubled it to 4. The guy that had 1 buried it in the ground. And that's what prompted the owner, the master, to say this: "You wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well, then you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. So take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Jesus didn't pull any punches here. He didn't use any soft language. There was no negotiation. He called it and said, "This is it. This is it. You wicked, lazy servant. Throw the servant outside where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Here's the deal. The problem wasn't that the servant failed. The problem was that he forgot his role. It wasn't that he failed. He forgot his role. And now what is his role? Well, in this story, we have owner and managers. We have an owner, and these servants could actually be called managers. One was managing 5 bags of gold, one was managing 2, one was managing 1. He forgot his role. He was not the owner, he was the manager. Now, there's a very big difference in that. I was trying to think, do I own anything? Well, actually, technically, I would say I own my house, but I really don't. The mortgage company does. All right, but if I was an owner, if I owned anything, I would have the right to do whatever I wanted to. If I wanted to be extravagant, I could be extravagant. If I wanted to be very conservative, I could be very conservative. If I was the owner, I could give my employees whatever I wanted to, or I could withhold if I wanted to. I could be cheap. I mean, owners can be jerks too, right? The buck stops with them. They can do what they want to do. Those of us that follow some NFL know that the owner of the Dallas Cowboys is still messing up. But anyway, the owner can do what they want because they own it. Manager is a different story. Because what is the manager? The manager is managing what the owner has, what the owner owns. When I was in high school, it wasn't technically my first job, but it was my longest tenured job. I worked at a grocery store. It was a small chain of stores in the Mobile area called Greer's, and Mr. Barnes was our store manager. Mr. Barnes was the one that hired me. I'm pretty sure my dad made him hire me or something. I think my dad worked that out for me to work there. Mr. Barnes was great. He made sure that he hired the right people. He made sure that the store was clean. He made sure that the store was stocked. Everything was ready for the customers that came in every day. And I was actually working at the time that we went to 7 days a week. When I started working there, we were only Monday through Saturday. But by the time I'd finished working there, we were open on Sundays. That was a big deal back then. But we had to because the Piggly Wiggly was opening up 7 days a week, so we had to go open up. Anyway, but he was great. He knew he was not the owner. And I never met the owner, by the way. If the owners made a trip down to our city and our store, I never saw them, never met them. Technically, I didn't never know their names. Their last name was Greer, I'm pretty sure, because there was family named Greer in the Mobile area. I never met them. All I knew was the manager. And he stayed there a long time. Why? He was there before I started, and he was there after I graduated. Why? Why was Mr. Barnes in that position so long? Because the owners trusted him. He knew that what was in the store and everything was not his own. Now, he treated it as if it was his own, but he knew, bottom line, he was not the owner. He was just taking care of it for the owner. And they trusted him. And they trusted him for many, many years. Now, here's the question that we all need to consider. Am I trustworthy? Because here's the deal. You are entrusted. Do you realize this? I am entrusted. You are entrusted. But I am trustworthy. But am I trustworthy? Now, you go, wait a second, what are you talking about? Well, the beginning of the story that Jesus says, here's verse 14. It will be like a man, the owner, going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. He entrusted his wealth to them. Now, I know many times, particularly with Jesus' parables, there are layers. There are different layers you can look at with parables. One example would be the parable of the prodigal son, and we think only of the prodigal son. Well, there's another layer. There's the layer of the older son, the aspect of the older son. There's the layer of the father. You have different layers to whatever you want to focus on, and if you want to teach and hone in on different things. Anyway, so I know there's layers to this, and one of my favorite professors, writers, Ellsworth Callis he did a couple of books called From the Backside. He'd look at stories and parables from the backside. He would look at it a different way than we traditionally interpret that. So there's maybe different ways to look at this parable, this story that Jesus told. But what I want you to understand is we got to look at the context first. The context of when Jesus is teaching this parable is in the context of talking about the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God. In other words, he's basically saying the kingdom of God, and God's the owner. And then we fall in line because we have been entrusted as servants, as followers of Jesus Christ, if you want to bring it forward to today. And this harkens back to David knew all this. David knew this idea of God being the owner and God entrusting us, because David says the earth is the Lord and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. So David, go back to Psalms, David understood that God is the owner. That God is the owner, and we have been entrusted. What have we been entrusted with? We have been entrusted with grace. Grace has been given to each and every one of us. We have been entrusted with this wonderful gift. And I will even say that that's the bare minimum of what we've been entrusted with, truthfully, of God's grace. This grace has been given to us. There's many other things that have been given to us, but I hope you catch the tone of this. That we have been entrusted, which means we have a responsibility and we have an opportunity. As God has entrusted each one of us, not only with grace, but some other things in life, we have this great opportunity and we have a great responsibility. Now, we're tempted in reading biblical passages and hearing stories. We're tempted to do like this one lady at my first church in Florida. I'll never forget. After a service one morning, went to her house for lunch, and she said, I wish so-and-so would have been there. They needed to hear that. And sometimes when we read stories, we're thinking of someone else. We're thinking, so-and-so needs to hear that. I'm gonna forward the link after this message to them so they can watch it on YouTube or on Facebook. Because they need to hear this. But we need to stay in our lane on this story. And we need to think about this. What has God given me? What has He graced me with in my life? What has He trusted me with right now? Where I am in my life right now. When I finished graduate school, I came back to Florida, Blountstown. I was there 5 years. And when I came back and was appointed the pastor there, every year, all of us pastors and pretty much anybody that wanted to spend $30 for a book could get this huge book that had a whole lot of information about the geographic area that we were in at the time, called the Alabama West Florida Conference. And in this book, you have every information about every pastor, even those who had died, and all the statistical information about the churches. You turn to the very back, and you would look up your district, and then you would look up your church. It was all there. It was literally like 4 spreadsheets per church or per district. But you had 4 different sheets that you could find information on. So you find typical information. You could find what was the average attendance, how many people were baptized, how many people died, all that stuff there. And then one of the last pages, it would show the financial strength of every individual church. And at that time, 638 churches, whatever, you have this huge list. So you find the financial strength of the church. How much did they give to missions? How much did they put in the buildings? How much in debt were they? And this one particular line that caught everyone's attention, pastor's compensation. Pastor's compensation. Nobody paid attention to that, did they? Of course they did. For 18 years, we had this information in front of us. The 18 years that they had it before that, but I only knew about it from 92 till 2010 or 11, whenever they stopped. But that financial stuff triggered some people. Because you know what we did. Those of us that came in when I did, we would look at each other. Well, what are they making? Well, I can't believe they're horrible. They're a terrible pastor. How are they doing that? And then we look at people who came in 10 years after us. I can't believe that. They don't deserve that. This jealousy and competition stuff was underneath the surface and nobody talked about it. And nobody talked about it. Fortunately, it came to an end in 2011. And I want to say of the bishops that I had served under, the one that came there was my least favorite, truthfully. But he did two positive things in his tenure as bishop. He got rid of those dumb tables so that the pastors could not see each other's salary. And most importantly, he left me alone. All right? So I appreciate that. Appreciate that about him. But there's a trigger there with the finances. And when this story, I want you to understand, when I read the bags of gold thing and told you about the 5 bags of gold, 2 bags of gold, 1 bag of gold, this is in the current NIV translation that I'm reading. The translation that actually is in your pew, you know what the word that is used instead of bags of gold? Talents. Talents is used. And I'm sort of wondering, because there's like 27 other translations that use talents instead of bags of gold. And I started wondering, why is that? And I think somewhere along the line that somebody decided to say, you know what, if we put this word talents in here, maybe it will lessen the effect of this story or something. That's sort of my thinking of why they chose this. Because the actual Greek word sounds like talents, talenton. It sort of sounds like talent, but it doesn't mean what we think of as talents. When we think of talents, we're thinking, oh, they speak, they're a good speaker, they're a good singer, they're a good builder, or they're a good financial person. We think of that as talents, right? So in our mind, in our English mind, we don't go to finances. But that's where this story is about finances. This is his wealth he entrusted here. And the word talenton, even though it sounds like talent, it actually references 75 pounds. It's like a unit of measurement. And 75 pounds in the vernacular of this day actually meant 20 years worth of wages for a day laborer. And if a day laborer was be pretty low on the rung, by the way. So 20 years of wages. So which means the guy who got 5 bags of gold, that's 100 years worth of wages. The guy that got 2, that's 40 years. And the guy who got 1 was 20. 20 years of wages. That sounds like a lot. What it is, if somebody gave me a lump sum of 20 years of my salary, I'd retire. Most of you would too. Well, not all of you, because some of you are like 20-something years old and you don't want to retire, and well, I'm going to do in 40 years. Anyway, so a lot of us would, though. We got 20 years and a lump sum. And I even did the math for poverty level. You know, so whatever the federal mandate, federal level for poverty level income in the United States, you know what 20 years is? Over $300,000 in today's world. So a lump sum of $300,000 with what this single guy got, this one bag guy, is what he got. But we have sympathy so many times when we read this story or hear this story, we have sympathy for the guy. He only got 1. Well, it's pretty substantial. It is pretty substantial. But we sort of tend to minimalize it. Well, it's just 1 because we're thinking 1 is next to nothing. Now think about that a little bit. 1 is next to nothing. But also 1 is next to 2 of what the other guy got. But for whatever reason, we like to minimize it a little bit. So my question is this: do we find ourselves waiting for more before we are faithful with what's in our hands now? Do we find ourselves waiting for more before we start being faithful with what we have in our hands now? And we may question this. We may think about this. We may have this minimalist view. He only got one, and I don't fault him for what he's doing. But listen to this, what Jesus says. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. That phrase there is what you need to take away when you hear these 3 different servants, each according to his own ability. Why was there a difference? Why 5? Why 2? Why 1? It was based on their ability. You see, we think we can handle everything. In our minds, we think we can handle it all. Doesn't matter what it is. We think we can handle it. But each of us have our own ability. Some of us can handle a lot. Some of us can't. Raise your hands if you think you can handle $314 million. Can you handle 314? Okay. I'm pretty sure a guy named Jack Whitaker would have said, yeah, I can handle $314 million, because that's what he won in the lottery. He's broke now. He's broke now. You know, a fool and his money are soon parted. And the more and more we look at NIL deals, I think we're going to see that. But anyway, there is a recent winner of lottery. Bless their hearts, they only won 1.8 billion. Bless their hearts. I know that's a struggle. But the first thing they did was seek financial counsel and legal counsel. You see, money doesn't reveal maturity. It amplifies it. It amplifies it. We are given what we can handle. We are given in what we can handle, which means faithfulness is obedience with what you have. Faithfulness is obedience with what you have. Now, today, not in 10 years, not what you think you can get in 10 years, not what you think will happen if something matures in 10, 15, 20 years, not when whatever is paid off in 30 years. Now, right now. You know, Jesus wasn't really comparing these 3 guys. He just evaluated them. Think about that. He just evaluated them. He saw something in the servant that he trusted him. He entrusted him with 5. With 100 years of wages, he entrusted that guy. With the guy with 40 years of wages, he saw something in that guy that he entrusted him with that. But the guy with 1, it feels like he's almost saying, I'm going to give you a chance. But it was not minimal. It was substantial. But it feels minimal, doesn't it? But it was like, here, I want you to prove it yourself. I want you to prove yourself. Prove your faithfulness with this 1 bag. And the owner actually, he did not condemn that servant for having just 1, for having little. He condemned him for nothing. He condemned him for nothing. Matthew 25:25. That servant said, I was afraid, and went out and hid your gold in the ground. So here's what belongs to you. And then the owner says, take that 1 bag from him and give it to the one who has 10. Take that 1 from him and give it to the one who has 10. Because what we refuse to use, we eventually lose. What we refuse to use, we eventually lose. Doing nothing is not neutral. Doing nothing is not neutral. I was afraid. That explains what was going on with the 1 bag servant. That fear explains it, but it doesn't excuse his actions. The fear that he had caused him not to act. And you know, there are times when fear will freeze our faith. But in this case, it doesn't just freeze this guy's faith. It persuades him to refuse to use God's gift. Fear persuaded him to refuse to use God's gift. Now, some of us are familiar with if we don't use it, we'll lose it. Most of us are familiar with that. If I just sit on a chair all day, day after day after day, then get into bed, then back in the chair, and I'm not getting up and moving around, I'm eventually not going to be able to. If we don't use it, we'll lose it. So we understand that. We are a world of thumb people, aren't we? I was talking to somebody today when I was walking around before the service. What were they doing? They were thumbing on their phones. We can thumb with the best of them. I bet what some of us have experienced is what I've experienced. I thumb and type so much, I cannot write in cursive anymore. I don't use it. And so I've lost it. So now I print. If I write anything by hand, I print. And I bet if I quit typing, I type regularly, pretty much almost every day I'm typing something. And I bet if I quit typing, I may not lose the ability to type, but I will lose efficiency if I quit typing regularly. When we refuse to use, we'll eventually lose. And Jesus took it away. He said, you didn't do anything. You can't remain neutral. And you did, and so you lost it. Money is not neutral either. Money is not neutral. Even Jesus, even the owner said, listen, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers. You should have put my money on deposit. At least I would have earned interest. So money's not neutral. I have a safe at my house. I keep a little bit of cash in there, and I'm perfectly okay understanding that it's losing. I'm losing money by keeping it in the safe at the house. You see, if I put that little bit of cash in a bank, every day it would earn something. It would earn something. Because it's not neutral. Money is not neutral. It doesn't stay neutral. You see, this servant didn't fail because he lacked talent. He just misunderstood the master. He just misunderstood the master. The servant's problem, get this, was not his behavior. It was his belief. It was his belief. You see, what you believe about God determines what you do with what he gives. What you believe about God determines what you do with what he gives. What is he? He's given you grace. He's entrusted you with so much. Whatever you have right now, he's entrusted you because the earth is the Lord's and everything is in it. And it is his. He's the owner. What you believe about God determines what you do with what he gives. So if you believe that God is like a sheriff, if you believe he is like a sheriff, then you're going to be scared. You're going to be scared to do anything for fear of being caught. It appears that this servant really didn't know the owner. He really didn't know the owner. When I moved here in 99, and nobody corrected me on this story at the first service, so I get to share it exactly the same way. When I moved in 99, TGI Fridays was on 231. It was right near Conestoga in that building that has been 100 different things. Anyway, but TGI Fridays was there. And I love going there because I love their Jack Daniel's barbecue sauce. I love that. Well, that restaurant didn't hang around very long. And I heard the story. This is rumor, this is hearsay, so I'm not telling you this 100% accurate. But I heard that the owner of that the manager of that TGI Fridays was not doing things the way that TGI Fridays ownership says to do them. They were not following whatever. And so I heard that TGI Fridays is the one that actually shut them down. I'm not an expert on franchises, by the way. We've had people in our church that have franchises. I don't know enough about them. But I figured out this about franchises. If I go to McDonald's, I should expect the same quality of product. Wait a second, let me rephrase that. When I go to McDonald's and I get a drink or a sandwich or something like that at one right here by the church, right down there at the Publix area, and I go to one in Mobile or go to one in Georgia or Birmingham, I should expect the taste to be the same. I should expect them to look alike, taste alike. That's what I expect. Because I have experienced that with Chick-fil-A. I go to a store here and a chicken sandwich, I go to the one in Troy or go to the one in Birmingham or Atlanta, that sandwich tastes exactly the same. Why? Because the manager knows the owner. The manager is doing what the owner wants to do. And there's consistency. You see, when that consistency breaks down, the product's going to suffer. The product is going to suffer. What you believe about God determines what you do with what He gives. This is God's kingdom we're in. And doing nothing is never neutral. Doing nothing is never neutral. In fact, doing nothing is unfaithful. It is unfaithful. So what are you doing with what you have? God's asking that question. What are you doing with what you have now? Perhaps you need to think about just taking a step this week. Maybe it's a step to where you've been hesitating, a step to jump in and serve. Maybe it's a step of, I haven't been giving, I've been holding back. Maybe that's where you need to step. Maybe it's a step where you need to speak up when you've kept silent. But doing nothing is never neutral.